Ring-a-ring-a roses, pockets full of posies. One by one they all fall down, never to rise in this lonely town. Sarah's breath formed a ghostly mist as she stood before the old house on Elm Street. It towered above her, its windows like unblinking eyes, and its walls groaning under the weight of untold stories. Seeking solitude after the chaos of city life, she found herself drawn to its eerie charm. As she pushed open the heavy front door, a symphony of creaks welcomed her into the dimly lit foyer. The air was thick with silence, a silence that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. Sarah's footsteps echoed across the hardwood floors as she wandered through the rooms. Each space was draped in shadows that danced just beyond her reach, as if playing a game only they understood. The house was a time capsule of faded beauty. Wallpaper curled in elegant decay, while antique fixtures held on to the last glimmer of a bygone era. As Sarah traced her fingers along the banister leading upstairs, she swore she heard a faint giggle from the darkness above. Shaking off her unease, she told herself it was just the old house settling. In the basement, amidst spider webs and dust-covered furniture, Sarah found it, a small, locked door set into the wall. The cold metal of the doorknob bit into her palm as she tested it. The door didn't budge, but Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine, a feeling that begged her to leave it alone. As day turned to night, shadows grew bold and stretched across the walls like ink spilled over parchment. Sarah lit candles to keep the darkness at bay, but their flickering flames cast unsettling shapes that seemed almost alive. It was then when she first heard it, whispers so soft that they were almost lost beneath the crackling of firewood. "Sarah," they seemed to call, a voice like wind through dead leaves. "No," she whispered back, pressing her hands to her ears. "Houses don't talk." Later that evening, as Sarah sat wrapped in a threadbare quilt with a book unread in her lap, there came a knock at her door. An old neighbor stood on her porch. His eyes held a sorrow so deep it looked like they might drown in it. With trembling lips, he offered only fragmented warnings. "The past pain of the house," he said, "never truly left. Trouble clings to these walls," he muttered before turning away, leaving Sarah with nothing but the echo of his words and a heart that thrummed uneasily in her chest. Up in the attic, where dust motes danced like tiny ghosts on sunbeams that struggled through dirty windows, Sarah discovered an old diary. Its pages, yellowed with age, told stories of a young boy's whispering friend who lived within these very walls. Her pulse quickened as she read each word, feeling an invisible gaze upon her neck. That night, as Sarah laid in bed, trying to convince herself that she was alone and safe, a faint creak echoed through the silence of the house. Down in the basement, where darkness reigned supreme and memories lingered like cobwebs, the small locked door groaned open without a touch, a silent invitation into an abyss yet unseen. And somewhere in the depths of that whispering silence, something ancient and hungry began to stir. Ring-a-ring-a roses, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, a tissue. We all fall down. Except, in the hush of Elm Street's forgotten manor, no one heard the sneezes nor saw the falls. Here, only silence held sway, a silence so heavy it seemed to suffocate the very air. Tom's footsteps clacked against the wooden floorboards as he hesitantly crossed the threshold into Sarah's new abode. His eyes flickered, not with the warm spark of a welcome guest, but with a jittery unease that clung to him like a second skin. Sarah noticed, her brow furrowed with concern as she studied her friend's paled features. "What is it, Tom?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly more than it should in the sparse hall. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Tom chuckled, a hollow sound, and glanced over his shoulder as if expecting some specter from a bygone era to materialize. "No, nothing like that," he replied, but his gaze told a different story. It lingered on the shadows that seemed too thick for the afternoon light, and on corners where dust danced with more vigor than what was natural. Together, they sat in Sarah's new yet ancient living room, the furniture creaking under their weight, as if unaccustomed to human presence. "Let's look up this place," suggested Tom, finally tearing his gaze from the unsettling corners. "The library, local history and all that. It's worth a shot." With a nod that signaled more resolve than she felt, Sarah agreed. They needed answers, and perhaps dusty archives held them tight in yellowed paper fists. The library was an edifice of knowledge, its roof vaulted like an old cathedral's, and its shelves standing solemn like silent sentinels of history. Their search led them through cobwebbed corridors of records to a small room lit by a dim bulb that flickered as if in protest. Tom's fingers brushed over cracked leather spines and faded titles until they unearthed newspaper clippings brittle with age. Each headline was bleaker than the last. Family vanishes without trace. Unexplained illness afflicts Elm Street home. Local child missing. Search continues. As Sarah sifted through these tales of woe, her hand froze upon finding the drawing. A crayon depiction of an entity vast and shadowy, towering over tiny figures with featureless faces. Children. The crude strokes conveyed an innocence lost and an understanding far beyond its creator's years. Sarah's heart thumped against her chest. Her breaths came sharp and quick. She couldn't tear her eyes away from it. The monster from a child's nightmare had bled its terror onto paper. Meanwhile, Tom's confession trickled into the dense air between them. His words seemed to carve themselves into the wooden table. "My sister," he began, voice barely above a whisper. "She loved this house, until she didn't." His eyes clouded with memories best forgotten. One day she vanished. Sarah reached across the table, her fingers brushing against Tom's hand, a lifeline amidst a sea of sorrow and regret. It was later when they returned to Sarah's home that evening that peculiarities became pronounced. Their shadows stretched too long across the walls, and door hinges moaned like souls in torment as they closed against the encroaching night. When they pressed play on the old tape recorder, they found in an attic box, expecting silence or at most static, their blood ran cold. A child's voice, clear but quivering with fear, pleaded in desperation before being swallowed by a sudden silence so absolute it seemed an entity unto itself. "We need to help them," Sarah murmured, though uncertainty played at the edges of her words. "Yes," Tom agreed with a solemn nod, "we have to." But as they exchanged these vows of rescue and redemption, somewhere within the house's bones, a chill not born of natural cold whispered among cobwebs and hidden spaces, an unseen watcher biding its time with eternal patience. Chapter 3. The Shape in the Glass. Mirror, mirror on the wall, don't show me things that creep and crawl. This twist on a familiar line sent a shiver down Sarah's spine as Tom's voice, hesitant and thick with unshed emotion, began to unravel his story in the dimly lit living room. Tom recounted the sorrow that once gripped his family. His little sister vanished without a trace, her laughter replaced by an oppressive silence that swallowed the house whole. His parents had searched tirelessly, but the house seemed to swallow every clue, every hope, leaving nothing but an echoing void. They moved away, but the shadow of the house on Elm Street clung to them like a relentless specter. Sarah listened intently, her own unease reflected in the glass of water she held, her fingertips brushing against the cold surface. She understood now. The whispering silence wasn't just an absence of noise. It was a presence, something waiting in the stillness. Their bond over shared fears solidified as they set out to confront the house's mysteries together. Their exploration led them to a patch of wall that felt unnaturally cold to the touch. Upon closer examination, they found the outline of a door hidden beneath layers of faded wallpaper, depicting cheerful scenes at odds with reality. With bated breath and shaking hands, they peeled away the deceitful paper to reveal a door that should not exist. The secret room beyond was a small, claustrophobic space, its air stale and heavy with dread. The walls were scratched, bearing desperate marks that told tales of terror without words. In this tomb-like chamber, darkness seemed to press against their skin, an almost palpable force. They were not alone. In the faint glow of their flashlights, shadows danced with malevolent joy. The entity from the child's drawing they'd found earlier was no longer confined to crumpled paper. It manifested in reflections on old photographs and window panes. The sight of it made Sarah's heart race with fear as it twisted and turned in unnatural angles, always just out of direct sight but very much felt. That night, after Tom had left with promises to return in the morning, Sarah's sleep was a fitful journey through nightmares. She saw herself reflected in countless mirrors around the house, each reflection beckoning her towards some unfathomable end. The entity's whispers were there too. Only in dreams did it reveal its hunger. an ancient craving rooted deep within the bones of the old house. The following day brought no comfort. Messages began to appear across Sarah's electronic devices, texts with no sender, computer screens flickering with invitations to join and embrace. Each message left her skin crawling as if touched by ghostly fingers. By evening, Sarah stood before her bathroom mirror, now a portal for fear, studying her reflection closely. New marks adorned her body, bruises in the shape of hands that seemed to reach out from beyond. She touched them tentatively. They were tender reminders of an unfathomable touch that marred both flesh and mind. The voice from her nightmare echoed again, a promise or a threat. "Join us," it said. And in that moment, Sarah knew she was being pulled into something far deeper than mere walls could contain. Ring around the rosy, pockets full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The familiar tune twisted into a sinister melody as the wind whispered it through the corridors of the old house on Elm Street. Sarah shivered, though she couldn't tell if it was from the draft or the growing sense of unease that clung to her like the cobwebs festooning the neglected corners of her new abode. The once grand residence now seemed to consume light, its walls gnawing at the weak rays of sunshine that dared penetrate its gloom. It was in this dimness that Sarah's world began to unravel. Objects betrayed their inanimate nature, dancing a macabre waltz that defied reason. Books flung themselves from shelves with violent intent. Chairs scraped across the floor, screeching as if in protest of some unseen burden. Each incident crescendoed into a symphony of chaos as Sarah watched, heart-pounding, unable to scream or flee. It was during one such eerie performance that Tom's absence became palpable. Promises of vital information hung in the air like a noxious perfume, yet he had vanished as thoroughly as if swallowed by the house itself. Sarah's calls for him were drowned out by the cacophony of supernatural disturbances. Her voice seemed feeble and lost amidst the turmoil. The skies conspired with the house, birthing a storm so violent it seemed apocalyptic. Trees bent their backs in submission to the howling gales. Rain battered against windows with the fervency of a desperate phantom begging for entry. Sarah felt trapped, a lone ship in an angry sea where escape was merely a fool's dream. In this tempest's brief respites, when lightning slashed at the heavens and illuminated her prison, Sarah spied ghostly apparitions. Children, eyes hollow, mouths agape in silent screams, flickered in and out of existence with each flash. Their warnings came in whispers carried by the storm. "Do not listen," they breathed. "Do not see." Desperation led Sarah to Tom's notes, scribbles and sketches that spoke of rituals and bindings. With trembling hands, she gathered what meager materials she could find. Salt spilled upon hardwood floors like grains of hope. Candles flickered to life, casting ominous shadows that writhed on walls, desperate to escape their waxy prisons. Symbols drawn in haste promised protection or doom. As Sarah began her incantations, a ritual born of fear more than understanding, the house groaned its disapproval. Words faltered on her lips as dread enveloped her, thick and suffocating like a shroud. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with an ancient hunger, yearning for something Sarah could not comprehend. Her voice was barely audible over the maelstrom when she reached the climax of her desperate plea for salvation. Suddenly, an unseen maw yawned within the very fabric of the house, pulling her into its gaping void with an eagerness that spoke of starvation long endured. When dawn's light finally cut through the tempest's remnants like a blade through shadow, it found an eerie calm had settled upon Elm Street. Of Sarah and her struggles against forces beyond understanding, no trace remained. The house stood silent once more, insatiable appetite concealed beneath a veneer of faded beauty. And as another family paused beside the for sale sign planted in untamed grasses, drawn by a price too good to be true, their laughter filled with innocent curiosity, they remained blissfully unaware of whispers that beckoned them inside. "Come find us," they hissed softly through rustling leaves. "Join us." Sarah's story was left unfinished, a tale suspended between realms where endings are never happy and friendships never endure.
Thank you all so much for lending your ears to the chilling tale of Whispers in the Walls. I hope the journey through the dark corridors of Sarah's house on Elm Street has left you with goosebumps and a thrill that lingers in the silence around you. If you enjoyed being ensnared in the web of whispers and shadowy companions, please give this video a like. It's the simplest way to let me know that you appreciate these haunting stories. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon. There are many more tales from beyond the veil waiting for you, and you wouldn't want to miss what lurks in the shadows, just out of sight. Remember, each like, subscription, and share helps ensure that our community of horror enthusiasts continues to grow, bringing together all those who revel in the eerie quiet before the storm of screams. Who knows what mysteries we'll uncover next time? Until then, keep listening to those whispers in the walls. After all, they might be trying to tell you something. Stay spooky, dear listeners.
Chapter 1. The Descent. In the darkness of the Egyptian night, a lone figure stood at the entrance of an ancient tomb, prepared to embark on a journey that would defy the boundaries of time. Dr. Jameson, a renowned archaeologist, felt the weight of history pressing down upon him as he gazed into the yawning maw of the tomb. With a deep breath, he recited a twisted version of a familiar children's rhyme, casting an eerie spell upon the air. As his team members readied their equipment, Dr. Jameson's mind churned with internal struggles and fears. The dimly lit, claustrophobic nature of the tomb bore down on him, enveloping him in a suffocating embrace. The air was thick with anticipation, and the sense of foreboding loomed heavy in the ancient corridors. "Are you ready, Doctor?" one of his team members asked, their voice quivering with trepidation. Dr. Jameson nodded, his jaw set in determination as he prepared to descend into the depths of the tomb. "Let's not keep history waiting," he replied, his words laden with both resolve and an underlying fear. As they ventured deeper into the labyrinthine passages, the group's footsteps echoed ominously against the weathered stone walls. Eerie whispers seemed to emanate from the ancient carvings, their words lost to time but not to the unsettling atmosphere they created. Dr. Jameson couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were fixed upon them, watching their every move with a malevolent intent. The oppressive weight of the tomb bore down upon them, and Dr. Jameson's unease grew with each step. Unexplained sounds echoed through the narrow passageways, and fleeting glimpses of something sinister darted through his peripheral vision. The shadows seemed to come alive, reaching out to ensnare them in their cold embrace. "Are we truly alone in here?" Dr. Jameson muttered to himself, his heart pounding in his chest. The significance of their discovery was not lost on them as they pressed forward, but so too were the potential dangers that lurked within these ancient walls. The sense of dread continued to mount as they ventured deeper into the heart of the tomb, unaware of the horrors that awaited them in the darkness. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Dark. Dr. Jameson delves deeper into the tomb, his footsteps echoing ominously against the ancient stone walls. The air feels heavy, suffocating, as if the darkness itself is pressing down on him, enveloping him in its suffocating embrace. The flickering torchlight casts dancing shadows that seem to come alive, reaching out to him with ghostly fingers. As he navigates the labyrinthine passages, he becomes acutely aware of the unsettling whispers that seem to emanate from the very walls themselves. The voices are indistinct, like fragments of half-remembered dreams, but they send a shiver down Dr. Jameson's spine. It's as though the tomb itself is alive, whispering secrets long forgotten in a language he can't quite comprehend. The oppressive atmosphere becomes almost palpable, suffusing the air with an unshakable feeling of dread. Dr. Jameson's unease grows with each step, his every sense heightened to the point of near hysteria. He starts to question his own sanity as the whispers become more insistent, more urgent, as if urging him to turn back while he still can. Amidst the shadows and silence, he catches fleeting glimpses of something sinister lurking just beyond the reach of his torchlight. A movement here, a glint of eyes there, disappearing as soon as he turns to face them. It's maddening, this constant feeling of being watched by unseen entities that lurk just beyond his line of sight. Despite his mounting unease, Dr. Jameson presses on, his footsteps faltering only momentarily before resuming their relentless march. The weight of the oppressive darkness seems to bear down on him with each passing moment, threatening to swallow him whole and erase every trace of his existence from the world above. And still, the whispers persist. growing louder and more urgent with each passing moment, their cryptic messages burrowing deep into Dr. Jameson's mind like insidious tendrils. He struggles to block them out, attempting to focus on the task at hand, but their relentless presence gnaws at the edges of his sanity. As he ventures deeper into the heart of the tomb, Dr. Jameson can't shake the feeling that he's treading on ground that was never meant to be disturbed. The weight of centuries-old secrets bears down on him like an invisible burden, threatening to consume him in its all-encompassing darkness. The whispers continue to haunt him, their ethereal voices becoming increasingly urgent and desperate with each passing moment. Dr. Jameson's resolve wavers as he battles against the encroaching terror, knowing deep down that there may be no escape from the chilling embrace of the tomb's malevolent presence. Chapter 3: The Curse Unleashed. Dr. Jameson's trembling hand brushed against the ancient hieroglyphics adorning the walls of the tomb, his fingers tracing the ominous markings with an unsettling sense of foreboding. As his torch flickered, casting eerie shadows across the chamber, the inscriptions seemed to come to life, whispering sinister warnings of a curse that had long been dormant. The air grew heavy with an unshakable sense of dread, as if the very walls of the tomb were closing in on Dr. Jameson and his team. The hieroglyphics pulsated with an otherworldly energy, their meaning cryptic and malevolent, hinting at the unspeakable horrors that lay dormant within the ancient burial chamber. Intriguing dialogue echoed through the dimly lit space as Dr. Jameson and his team members huddled together in a desperate attempt to decipher the foreboding inscriptions. Their voices quivered with fear and uncertainty, their words laden with a palpable sense of impending doom. "I've never seen anything like this before," Dr. Jameson murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "These markings, they speak of a curse, a force so ancient and malignant that it defies comprehension." His team members exchanged nervous glances, their expressions reflecting the growing unease that permeated the tomb. Each hesitant word seemed to hang in the air like a heavy shroud, suffocating them with the weight of ancient malevolence. As they debated whether to press on or heed the ominous warnings etched into the very walls around them, a sudden chill swept through the chamber, sending shivers down their spines. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to thicken with each passing moment, as if the curses inscribed on the walls were seeping into their very souls. Dr. Jameson's internal turmoil became increasingly evident as he grappled with the implications of defying the ancient curse. His mind was consumed by a relentless torrent of dread and apprehension, his thoughts consumed by an ever-growing sense of impending catastrophe. The curse had been unleashed, its malevolent whispers echoing through the depths of the tomb, like an ominous prelude to unspeakable horrors yet to come. And as Dr. Jameson and his team stood on the precipice of unfathomable terror, they knew that they had ventured into a realm where ancient forces held sway, a realm from which there could be no escape. The open ending loomed ominously on the horizon, hinting at the lingering horrors awaiting Dr. Jameson beyond the confines of the tomb, a fate from which there could be no reprieve. Chapter 4: Haunting Visions. Dr. Jameson's steps echoed off the ancient stone walls, reverberating through the narrow passages of the tomb. As he ventured deeper into the labyrinthine depths, the air grew heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint sound of his own breathing. Suddenly, a haunting whisper slithered through the darkness, sending a shiver down his spine. In the dim torchlight, Dr. Jameson's gaze fixated on the walls, adorned with cryptic hieroglyphs that seemed to writhe and shift with an otherworldly energy. As he continued forward, the markings began to warp and contort, twisting into grotesque figures that danced before his eyes. His mind reeled with terror as these haunting visions melded with his reality, blurring the line between nightmare and truth. Unearthly whispers clawed at the edges of his sanity, and he struggled to discern between what was real and what was a product of his fraying mind. The air grew thick with an unseen malevolence, suffocating Dr. Jameson in a web of nightmarish hallucinations. Grotesque figures loomed in the shadows, their ghastly forms contorting and shifting with each flicker of torchlight. Dr. Jameson's heart raced as he stumbled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could feel their malevolent gaze upon him, their presence a suffocating weight in the air. Lost in a labyrinth of terror, Dr. Jameson grappled with his unraveling sanity, struggling to cling to the tenuous threads of reality. Each flickering torch cast eerie shadows that seemed to dance and mock him, further fueling his mounting fear. Desperate whispers echoed through the tomb, filling Dr. Jameson's mind with a maddening cacophony of dread. Is this real? Are they real? Dr. Jameson muttered to himself in a voice laced with desperation, his words swallowed by the oppressive darkness. As he stumbled through the twisting passages, his mind became a battleground for sanity and madness, teetering on the precipice of an abyssal void. In that suffocating darkness, Dr. Jameson fought to make sense of his nightmarish ordeal, a lone figure engulfed by the relentless horrors that lurked within the heart of the tomb. The haunting visions continued to assail him, twisting reality into a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. This is where Chapter 4 ends. Chapter 5: Betrayal in Shadows. Dr. Jameson's team members exhibited strange behavior deep within the tomb. Their eyes held a distant, secretive gaze, and an air of mistrust hung heavy in the claustrophobic air. The dim torchlight cast long, foreboding shadows, emphasizing the growing tension among the group. As Dr. Jameson navigated the labyrinthine passages, he couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was manipulating his colleagues. Their hushed whispers and furtive glances spoke volumes, hinting at betrayal and dark secrets lurking within the shadows of the ancient tomb. "Are you sure we're alone down here?" Dr. Jameson's voice echoed off the ancient walls. His words met with uneasy silence from his team. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to amplify their growing paranoia, and Dr. Jameson felt increasingly isolated in the suffocating darkness. "I thought I heard something," one of his team members muttered, their voice tinged with fear. The unsettling sound of distant footsteps reverberated through the tomb, setting their nerves on edge. Dr. Jameson's heart raced as he grappled with the realization that there was more than just ancient curses lurking within the depths of the tomb. A palpable sense of dread hung in the air, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by unseen malevolent forces. The flickering torchlight cast eerie, shifting shadows as they pressed on, each step heightening their apprehension. The weight of history and impending doom loomed over them, intensifying their growing mistrust and paranoia. As they delved deeper into the tomb's foreboding depths, Dr. Jameson couldn't escape the overwhelming sense that they were being led into a trap by forces beyond their comprehension. The chilling realization sank in that there was no escape from the impending horrors lurking in the shadows. Their whispered exchanges hinted at a sinister undercurrent that threatened to tear apart their fractured unity, leaving them vulnerable to the insidious influence of the tomb's dark secrets. The oppressive silence was shattered only by their quickening breaths and shuffling footsteps, each echoing off the ancient walls like a haunting refrain of impending betrayal and treachery. The chapter ends with a lingering sense of unease and apprehension as Dr. Jameson and his team are enveloped in the suffocating grip of fear and mistrust, setting the stage for even greater terror to unfold in Dark Secrets of the Tomb, Dr. Jameson's nightmarish ordeal. Chapter 6: Echoes of Darkness. Dr. Jameson's footsteps echoed through the dimly lit corridors of the ancient tomb, each step reverberating like a haunting drumbeat. The air grew thick with an inexplicable sense of dread, as if the very walls themselves were closing in on him. Every shadow seemed to twist and contort, taking on a life of its own in the oppressive darkness. As he ventured further into the heart of the tomb, Dr. Jameson encountered a series of harrowing trials that tested his willpower and resolve in malevolent ways. Sinister whispers filled the air, their chilling words worming their way into his mind like icy tendrils of fear. The flickering torchlight cast eerie, dancing shadows that seemed to mock his every move. The trials themselves were macabre in nature, designed to prey upon his deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Each one felt like a descent into madness, an unrelenting assault on his sanity. Ghastly apparitions materialized before him, their hollow eyes boring into his soul with malicious intent, while unseen forces tugged at the fringes of his consciousness, threatening to unravel his very being. In the midst of these nightmarish ordeals, Dr. Jameson's struggles began to peel away the layers of his character, exposing his rawest vulnerabilities and most deeply buried secrets. His inner turmoil manifested in desperate whispers that escaped his trembling lips, revealing his profound sense of despair and relentless determination to survive the unyielding terror that engulfed him. Amidst the unending torment, Dr. Jameson grappled with a darkness that seemed to seep into every fiber of his being, threatening to consume him whole. His anguished cries echoed through the labyrinthine passages, a haunting symphony of suffering that resonated with the very soul of the tomb itself. As he navigated the treacherous trials, Dr. Jameson's resolve was pushed to the brink, and yet he pressed on, driven by a desperate need to defy the malevolent forces that sought to claim him. His internal struggle played out in a cacophony of emotions: fear, rage, and an unyielding determination to emerge from the depths of the tomb with his sanity intact. The echoes of darkness reverberated through the ancient corridors, intertwining with Dr. Jameson's maddening journey through the heart of unspeakable terror. The relentless onslaught threatened to break him, yet he refused to succumb, clinging to a sliver of hope amidst the suffocating darkness. As Dr. Jameson's harrowing trials reached their crescendo, an unshakable sense of impending doom loomed over him like a shroud, casting a long shadow over his very existence within the tomb's unfathomable depths. Chapter 7: The Final Revelation. Dr. Jameson's trembling hand reached out to touch the ancient mural etched into the heart of the tomb. As his fingertips grazed the weathered stone, a chilling sensation crept up his spine, sending shivers cascading through his entire being. The mural depicted a grotesque creature, its leathery wings outstretched in a display of malevolence, while its piercing eyes seemed to bore into Dr. Jameson's very soul. A wave of dread washed over him as he realized the true nature of the tomb and the horrifying forces that lay dormant within its depths. The unsettling revelation gnawed at his mind, leaving an indelible mark that would haunt him long after he emerged from the suffocating confines of the ancient structure. The oppressive weight of impending doom hung heavy in the stale air, suffocating Dr. Jameson's every breath as he stumbled back from the mural. The truth had been laid bare before him, and it was more terrifying than anything he could have imagined. As he retraced his footsteps through the labyrinthine passages of the tomb, Dr. Jameson's mind raced with unanswered questions and lingering uncertainties. The unsettling whispers that had plagued him from the moment he set foot in the tomb now seemed to mock him with newfound malevolence, echoing through the depths of his fractured psyche. Emerging from the tomb, Jameson was greeted by the harsh light of day, but even in the blinding brightness, he could not shake off the feeling of impending horror that lingered like a dark specter at the edge of his perception. The open ending of Dr. Jameson's nightmarish ordeal left readers with a profound sense of unease, hinting at the lingering horrors that awaited beyond the confines of the tomb. The chilling revelation had seared itself into Dr. Jameson's soul and would continue to torment him, leaving readers with a lingering sense of terror that defied explanation. The harrowing journey into darkness had left its mark on Dr. Jameson's very essence, casting a shadow over his world that would never truly dissipate. And as readers contemplated the unknown horrors that awaited him beyond the confines of the tomb, they were left with a sense of unease that would linger long after they closed the final pages of this terrifying tale. Thank you for listening to this bone-chilling horror story. I hope it sent shivers down your spine and left you feeling a little uneasy. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more terrifying tales. Your support keeps the fear alive, so stay tuned for more spine-tingling stories to haunt your dreams. Thank you, and may you never venture into abandoned tombs beneath ancient pyramids.
Ring-a-ring-a roses, pockets full of posies. Atishu! Atishu! We all fall down into the silence of Silent Shadows Lane. Ethan's sneakers crunched on the gravel as he skittered to a stop at the mouth of Silent Shadows Lane. The cool, dense fog hung like a veil over the world, turning the familiar into the unknown. His breath came out in wispy clouds, mingling with the mist that shrouded everything in mystery. He squinted at the silhouette of the abandoned house at the end of the street. It stood there, a brooding specter that clawed at the edges of his adventurous heart. Behind him, his little sister Lily trailed, her sketchpad clutched tightly under her arm. She had a knack for capturing moments like these when the fog turned their small town into a canvas of grays and silhouettes, ripe for her pencil to animate. Their parents, ensconced in their respective worlds of spreadsheets and phone calls, seldom noticed the siblings' comings and goings. The house's walls echoed with silence more often than laughter, leaving Ethan and Lily to fill their own voids with imagination and each other's company. The fog seemed to breathe around them, whispering secrets only it knew, as they wove through their day in a town that perpetually seemed caught between day and night. But as captivating as the fog was, it also served as a barrier, a soft wall that isolated them from everything outside their small cocoon on Silent Shadows Lane. Ethan had long learned to dismiss the whispers that seeped from his closet late at night as figments of his overactive imagination, a trait shared by all great explorers, he assured himself. Yet, there was an edge to the silence in their house that sometimes made him doubt. Lily had her own peculiarities. She drew what she saw or what she dreamed, and often she sketched the sick girl, a pale figure from her nightly visions who never smiled but always seemed to linger near. Their toys played hide-and-seek without them, a doll found sitting atop a bookshelf one morning, or a train set rearranged by unseen hands. Their parents never noticed. The children wondered, but were undeterred. It was over dinner, an affair punctuated by clinking cutlery rather than conversation, that Ethan voiced his desire to venture into the forbidden territory of the old house. "You stay away from there," their father said with an uncharacteristic sternness that sliced through the room's usual apathy. "It's unsafe," he added, eyes darting away to his cooling food. Lily piped up then, her voice soft but clear. "The sick girl likes my drawings," she said, tilting her head as if listening for approval from a friend no one else could see or hear. Her parents exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them that ended with an uneasy shrug. That night, after Ethan had triple-checked his closet for unwanted whispers, and Lily had placed her latest drawing, a somber depiction of the sick girl, on her nightstand, they both found something new in their backyard. A rusty train toy sat forlornly on the grass, its whistle sounding a sorrowful note, even though no one was there to blow it. Ethan lay in bed, pondering that mournful sound until curiosity got the better of him. He tiptoed to his window and peered out into the night-shrouded garden, where fog curled around the train like grasping fingers. With a determined breath he couldn't quite feel in his chest, Ethan decided tomorrow he would solve the mystery of Silent Shadows Lane once and for all. But as sleep claimed him, his resolve was met with a fluttering curtain seen from across the street, the window of the old house that should have remained still in the lifeless night air. Chapter 2. Shadows Creep. Under a sky smothered by the thick gray embrace of an endless fog, Ethan tiptoed towards the house that everyone whispered about but never dared to approach. The boards groaned beneath his sneakers, protesting each secretive step he took around the perimeter of the abandoned house at the end of Silent Shadows Lane. It was as if the very earth itself was warning him to turn back, to flee to the safety of his own warm bed. But something invisible and compelling urged him onward. Meanwhile, Lily sat cross-legged on her bed, her sketchpad splayed open before her like a silent confidant. With a furrowed brow, she drew in earnest, her hand guided by images that danced behind her closed eyelids. In her dreams, she met a girl with sunken cheeks and hollow eyes that seemed to plead for attention. They never spoke in words, but their shared language of drawings wove a bond between reality and fantasy that Lily couldn't and didn't want to break. The world outside seemed muffled, as if Silent Shadows Lane was cupped in the hands of an invisible giant. Inside their home, sounds were strangely absent, giving the impression that they were submerged underwater. Ethan's parents had begun to notice too, the chill that clung to their clothes like invisible icicles, and the musty odor that no amount of cleaning could purge from the house. One afternoon, as Ethan returned from his reconnaissance of the old house, he found an old doll with matted hair and a porcelain face, cracked like a spiderweb, resting at the foot of the backyard oak tree. The doll's glassy eyes held his gaze with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine, and he could swear they flickered with a knowing glint when he wasn't quite looking. That night at dinner, amid clinking cutlery and the hum of the refrigerator, Ethan's parents spoke in hushed tones about whispers they'd heard in the dark. It was as if secrets were being shared just out of earshot. Ethan's fork paused midway to his mouth. His curiosity was a gnawing hunger inside him. Lily mentioned casually between bites of mashed potato that the sick girl wants us to play with her. The words hung in the air like cobwebs, out of place and disquieting. Ethan felt something akin to fear claw at his insides, but masqueraded it with a cough. Later, when shadows pooled in every corner of their home as night fell, Ethan found an old photograph in the attic. It depicted a family standing rigidly before a familiar house. Their house before it became abandoned. A young child's face was scratched out so violently that the paper had ripped. Ethan's fingers traced over the jagged lines as an unsettling thought wormed its way into his mind. Who wanted to erase this child from memory? That night, as Ethan lay awake listening to the silence that wasn't quite silent, he heard it. A giggle that crept from within the walls, soft but unmistakable. It was followed by another giggle mirroring it perfectly, a chilling chorus of two voices blending into one. Ethan turned slowly to face his sister lying asleep across the room. Her chest rose and fell rhythmically with slumber's deep embrace, except her lips moved ever so slightly, as if she were whispering secrets in her dreams. A tickle of dread crept up Ethan's spine as he realized with horror that the laughter echoing within their walls sounded eerily like Lily's own. Chapter 3. Whispers and Warnings. The air was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your ears in the dead of night. In the hush, Ethan thought he could hear the faintest strains of a discordant melody, like a warning call from a forgotten time. Lily sat across from him at the breakfast table, her eyes distant, lost in thoughts he could no longer reach. The unease had settled into their home like an unwelcome guest. The arguments between their parents had grown louder, more desperate, as if trying to drown out the oddities that had infiltrated their lives. "It's just old pipes," their father would insist, but the clanging at night sounded more like whispers than water. Outside, the weather turned as quickly as a mood. A thunderstorm erupted out of nowhere, lashing at the windows with rain that fell like nails. Silent Shadows Lane was cut off from the world by sheets of water and a thick fog that clung greedily to every surface. Lightning cracked open the sky, and each flash illuminated the ancient house at the end of the street, making it appear as though it was breathing in time with the storm. During one such burst of light, Ethan saw her, the sick girl from Lily's drawings, standing pale and silent in their living room. Her shadowy figure seemed to ripple with the curtains as she whispered words lost to the thunder's growl. She pointed towards her weather-beaten home before dissolving into darkness. Their toys took on a life of their own. A jack-in-the-box sprung open without touch, its painted jester leering at them with hollow eyes. The rocking horse began to sway so violently that it seemed on the verge of galloping into some unseen night. Later that evening, Ethan cornered Lily in her room. "Lily," he pleaded, his voice thick with fear, "please, tell me what she said." But Lily turned away, clutching her sketch pad to her chest as if it could protect her from his questions. Blue lightning split the night again, and above them came a thump so loud it shook the pictures on the walls. They both jumped, and Lily's sketch pad tumbled to the floor, spilling her latest drawings like omens. Their parents, unnerved by the incessant storm and strange occurrences, sought answers through a seance. They sat around an old oak table, hands touching lightly on its polished surface. "Is anybody here with us?" their mother asked the empty room. But only silence replied, a dense silence that seemed to mock their fear. As night deepened its hold on Silent Shadows Lane, Lily rose from her bed and walked as though in a trance. She slipped silently down the stairs and out into the tempestuous night. Ethan found Lily's sketchpad laid open on the kitchen table. His eyes were drawn to a chilling new scene, a fragmented family portrait torn apart by unseen forces. Above them all loomed the sick girl, her hand clasped around another child, Lily's double. His heart pounding with dread, Ethan raced out into the storm after his sister. Every clap of thunder called out like an omen as he followed Lily's path towards that ominous house which seemed to swallow light and hope alike. The chapter closes on this haunting image, Lily's small figure shrouded by rain, drawn inexorably towards the decaying vestige of a home where laughter had long since died. And just behind her, pages fluttering in the wind from an abandoned sketchpad, the ghostly outline of a girl reaching out for companionship in an endless dance between dream and nightmare. The moon was a thin sliver in the night sky, barely casting light upon silent Shadows Lane. The fog curled around Ethan's ankles as he stood at the threshold of the abandoned house, a gaping maw of darkness waiting to swallow him whole. His breaths came out in short, visible puffs, the cold air biting into his lungs. With a swallow that felt like swallowing sandpaper, he stepped across the broken doorway. Ethan, his mother's voice, frantic and shrill, sliced through the fog behind him. But Ethan's focus was on the inside. The walls of the house seemed to lean in towards him, whispering secrets of a time long gone. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light that crept through boarded-up windows, and an odor, musty and sweet like rotting fruit, filled his nostrils. He could hear Lily's soft voice above him, humming a discordant tune that made the hair on his neck stand up. "Lily," he called out, his voice trembling, despite his efforts to sound brave. The staircase creaked in protest as he ascended, each step unsure whether to hold or send him plummeting into darkness. At the top, the hallway stretched before him, a never-ending tunnel with doors that offered more questions than answers. In one room, Ethan found toys he recognized from their own home, arranged in a circle as though waiting for a tea party to commence. A porcelain doll with a cracked face stared blankly at him, her empty eyes seeming to follow his every move. "Hide and seek," Lily's voice floated down to him, deceptively sweet. They liked to play hide and seek. Ethan stumbled into another room where an old bed sat against the wall. The ragged remnants of wallpaper clung desperately to the plaster, depicting faded scenes of pastoral bliss that clashed grotesquely with the reality of decay around him. He caught movement from the corner of his eye and turned sharply, only to find a mirror streaked with age. For a second, he saw a flash of a little girl with hollow cheeks and deep-set eyes that hungered for life. But he blinked, and she was gone, leaving Ethan to wonder if he had seen her at all. Lily? His call was more desperate now as he entered what must have been a playroom. A once vibrant mural was smeared across one wall, colors bleeding into one another to form shapes that twisted in the low light like shadows come alive. There she was. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by translucent figures that flickered like candle flames. They turned their heads towards Ethan as he entered, their faces shrouded by shadow, or perhaps something far worse. "They want to play one last game," Lily said without looking up from her sketchpad. "Hide and seek." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. This was wrong, all of it. "We need to go home," he pleaded, but Lily shook her head slowly. "You hide first." Before Ethan could argue further, an invisible force pushed him back into the hallway. He stumbled backward into a closet, pulling the door closed just as footsteps began to echo through the abandoned hallways. 1, 2, 3. He counted silently, pressing himself into the darkness as if trying to become part of it. 4, 5, 6. His heart pounded against his ribs, so loud he feared it would give him away. 7, 8, 9. The footsteps grew closer, a slow approach that spoke volumes of patience gained over endless years. 10. Ethan peeked through a sliver in the closet door just enough to see the figure stopped outside his hiding place. The suspense stretched on like hours instead of seconds until all fell silent, save for his own ragged breathing. The shadowy figure stood still as death itself, a dark silhouette that both was and wasn't Lily. Both was and wasn't the sick girl. Then, the world faded away into nothingness, leaving only darkness and Ethan's unspoken fears hanging in an endless void where answers should have been.
Thank you all for joining me on this eerie journey through The Girl Who Wasn't There. I hope the chills that crept up your spine were as thrilling for you as they were for the children ensnared by the pale observer's haunting lullaby. If the shadows of this tale linger in the corners of your mind, and the echoes of that ghostly song play softly in your ears, do not forget to like this chilling narration. Subscribe for more stories that will whisper to you in the dark and leave imprints in the dust of your dreams. Keep the candles burning, dear listeners, and remember, the next time you hear children laughing where no children should be, it might just be the girl who wasn't there calling out to you. Good night, sleep tight, and may your dreams be undisturbed by the unseen. Until our next ghostly tale.
The mirror.
In the dimly lit room of the old decrepit mansion, a solitary candle flickered, casting eerie, elongated shadows on the faded, peeling wallpaper. The air was thick with a palpable sense of foreboding as Sarah, a young woman with a haunted past, cautiously stepped forward. Her footsteps echoed through the empty corridors, the creaking floorboards adding to the unsettling atmosphere. As she reached the dusty attic, she uncovered an unsettling truth. The journal, its pages yellowed with age, belonged to her ancestor who had been accused of practicing dark magic and making a chilling pact with an otherworldly entity. The writing spoke of a curse that had plagued their family for generations, each page filled with cryptic symbols and chilling incantations. In the dim light, an old cracked mirror hung on the far wall, seemingly reflecting more than just Sarah's frightened face. She felt an icy presence behind her, and her heart pounded with fear, matching the ominous rhythm of the wind outside. The room grew colder, and the candle extinguished itself with a ghostly hiss, plunging the attic into complete darkness. In the oppressive darkness of the attic, Sarah's breath hung in the air like a spectral mist. She fumbled for her flashlight and clicked it on, its feeble beam revealing an unsettling sight. The cracked mirror now held a faint, ethereal image, a sinister figure lurking in the shadows. As Sarah gazed into the mirror, she heard faint, spectral whispers that sent shivers down her spine. The voices spoke in a language long forgotten, a chilling incantation that seemed to beckon her closer. Against her better judgment, she moved nearer to the mirror, her reflection merging with the ghostly figure. Suddenly, the attic seemed to come alive with eerie phenomena. Objects levitated and danced in midair, the temperature dropped to bone-chilling levels, and the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. Sarah's heart raced as she realized that she had awakened a malevolent force, one that hungered for her soul. Sarah stumbled backward, away from the malevolent presence in the mirror. The attic's atmosphere grew even more oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in on her. The spectral whispers intensified, now forming words that echoed through her mind like a haunting refrain. The journal in her hands trembled, its pages flipping by themselves, revealing a horrifying revelation. Her ancestor had attempted to banish the malevolent entity, but the ritual had gone horribly wrong. The curse was now tied to the bloodline, and it demanded a sacrifice to be set free. Desperation gnawed at Sarah as she realized the dire implications. She was the last living descendant, the only one who could break the curse, but doing so would require the ultimate sacrifice. The malevolent force in the mirror hungered for her soul, and it would stop at nothing to claim it. With trembling hands, Sarah tried to retreat from the attic, but the room seemed to have become a labyrinth, its walls shifting and closing in on her. She was trapped in a nightmare, and the only way out was to confront the malevolent entity that lurked within the mirror. Sarah stood before the malevolent entity, trapped within the mirror. Its form was a grotesque, shadowy figure, writhing and contorting as if in agony. Its eyes, filled with malice, locked onto hers, and an unnerving grin twisted its spectral face. The room itself seemed to come alive with the malevolent force's presence. The walls groaned and bled an inky darkness. Sarah's breaths were labored, and her heart pounded as she tried to summon the courage to confront the entity. The entity's voice, a chilling amalgamation of whispers and screams, echoed in her mind, It taunted her, revealing her deepest fears and darkest secrets. It knew her vulnerabilities and used them to torment her. With a trembling voice, Sarah spoke the words of her ancestors' failed banishment ritual, her voice quivering but determined. As the incantation left her lips, the mirror shattered into countless shards, and the malevolent entity let out a blood-curdling scream. The attic returned to its eerie stillness, but Sarah knew that the curse had not been broken entirely. She had banished the entity from the mirror, but it still lingered in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to return. The mansion's silence was deafening in the aftermath of the confrontation. The shattered remnants of the mirror lay scattered, reflecting fragments of the dim room. Sarah, drained from her ordeal, felt an initial wave of relief wash over her. But as the minutes passed, a creeping realization dawned upon her. The entity might have been banished from the mirror, but its essence lingered. Every shadow in the mansion seemed deeper, every creak of the floorboards more pronounced. A cold draft enveloped the room, and the candle's flame flickered erratically, as if disturbed by an unseen presence. Sarah decided to leave the mansion, hoping to escape the haunting memories of that night. But as she made her way to the exit, she noticed her reflection in a window pane. It wasn't just her staring back. The malevolent entity's faint outline loomed behind her, its spectral grin mocking her attempt at escape. Panicking, Sarah rushed out, leaving behind the cursed mansion and the journal. But wherever she went, every reflective surface, a puddle, a glass, a polished stone, showed her the same haunting image. The entity, always lurking, always watching. The mansion stood abandoned, a grim testament to the horrors within, and Sarah, forever haunted by the entity's relentless pursuit, became a wandering soul, searching for a respite she feared she might never find. If this chilling tale sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to smash that like button. Delve deeper into the darkness by subscribing and hitting the bell. Remember, every like and subscribe keeps the shadows at bay, for now.
Ring-a-ring-a roses, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down into the abyss of forgotten memories. The letter lay on Abigail Abby Fletcher's desk, as out of place as a shadow in a room of light. Its envelope was yellowed with age, the edges frayed as though worried by anxious fingers long since stilled. Abby's heart drummed a nervous beat as she reached for it, her fingertips tracing the curve of the wax seal before breaking it open. Inside was a slip of paper, no bigger than a bookmark. On it, a poem penned in ink that had long dried to the color of old blood. In Whitechapel's grip, where shadows thrive, lies a secret deep and dark, a key to history kept alive. Await your hand to disembark. Accompanying the cryptic verse was a small brass key, its teeth worn from use. The rumors had always whispered through Abby's family, haunting them like an ancestral curse. How her great-great-grandmother had once danced dangerously close to London's most notorious fiend, Jack the Ripper. Abby's journalistic mind buzzed with theories. Was this letter an invitation to delve into her own past? The air in Whitechapel clung to her skin like a clammy shroud as she stepped from the train. Fog twisted through the streets like ghostly serpents, obscuring the world beyond a few paces. The buildings leaned in over the streets, their windows empty eyes judging her. Abby wrapped her coat tighter against the chill. It wasn't just the cold, there was a weight to this place, a historical heaviness felt in each cobblestone that remembered too much bloodshed. She hurried on, feeling eyes on her back with every step. The bank loomed before her, imposing and indifferent to its role in this unfolding mystery. Inside, she presented the key and was led to a small room where a safety deposit box waited like a tomb about to be opened. The locket inside was delicate and ornate, silver tarnished from time with an engraving she could barely make out, The Reckoning. It felt unseasonably cold against her palm and filled her heart with an uneasy dread. Clutching the locket, Abby turned to leave, but stopped short. A chill skittered down her spine as she realized she wasn't alone. The shadows seemed thicker near the entrance, holding a stillness that was almost sentient. She left quickly, not daring to look back, until she was bathed in the flickering glow of street lamps outside. But even then, she could feel it, the unblinking gaze of something unseen in Whitechapel's embrace. Abby knew one thing for certain: her search for answers had only just begun. And somewhere in the murky depths of history's grip, something watched and waited for her next move. Chapter 2: Whispers in the Fog. All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream, but some dreams are nightmares. The night had wrapped Whitechapel in its dark embrace, and Abigail Fletcher wandered its streets with an oil lamp in her trembling hand. The heavy fog curled around her boots like living tendrils, whispering secrets of a centuries-old horror. Abby could almost feel the breath of the city's ghoulish past on her nape as she delved deeper into its heart. Abby's days had turned to nights, buried under the weight of historical records, speaking to those whose families had been here when Jack the Ripper carved his legacy into the fabric of Whitechapel. She sat for hours with the local historians, their faces creased like the pages of the books they worshipped, listening to them recount tales blurred by time. The whispers started soon after. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves in a silent forest, then growing clearer, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the fog itself, saying words she couldn't understand, followed by shadows that skittered away when she turned to look. Each time she convinced herself it was just a stray cat or a trick of light, but doubt nestled firmly within her mind. Abby frequented decrepit pubs where gas lamps fought against the consuming darkness. There, amidst the clinking of glasses and the murmur of hushed voices, she met an old tavern keeper whose tales were as engraved into his soul as the lines on his face. "Jack's spirit ain't never left us," he muttered over a pint of bitter ale. "Some nights, when the fog's as thick as thieves' fingers, you can hear him, laughing." His words sent chills down Abby's spine as she considered them against the backdrop of rain-slick cobblestones and flickering gaslight shadows on her lonely walk back to her lodgings. The obsession with uncovering what haunted her lineage led Abby into endless nights sequestered in her rented room, surrounded by mounting piles of documents. The locket lay open beside her, a chilling memento, as she scoured over an obituary for her ancestor tucked inside it. The words, "The Reckoning," etched beneath the printed name, stared back at her, mocking her with its meaning, yet uncovered. "No rest for the wicked," she whispered to herself, drawing a weary hand across her eyes. That whisper returned to her on a breath of cold air as she lay in bed staring out into the impenetrable fog outside her window. Abigail. It was nothing more than a sigh on the wind, so faint she might have imagined it, but deep down she knew she hadn't. She rose from her bed and approached the window. Her own reflection stared back at her from the glass, pale and ghost-like, before it was distorted by another voice in the fog calling her name once more. Abby pressed her forehead against the cold glass pane, searching for a source in the swirling mists. Was it real, or was it all unraveling into madness? The question hung in the air, as thick and unyielding as the fog that entrapped Whitechapel. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most doomed of them all? Abby Fletcher found herself whispering these words, her breath fogging the antique mirror's surface. A shiver ran down her spine as her own reflection seemed to tremble, the glass rippling like disturbed water. Focused, she watched the mirror intently, her heartbeat a drumroll in her ears, as the eyes that gazed back at her began to morph, darkening into a gaze that was not her own. The eyes of Jack seemed to lurch from history's shadowy veil, fixing her with a piercing stare that promised untold terrors. Her room in the old hotel felt smaller by the minute, the walls closing in as if they breathed with malice. Abby had become a recluse, the outside world fading away to nothing as she doggedly pursued her frightening quest. Torn between terror and an insatiable need for answers, she delved further into isolation. Items from a bygone era started appearing inexplicably in her room. a rusty scalpel, a blood-stained handkerchief, items that could belong in a museum, their presence an eerie reminder of Jack's haunting legacy. Victorian-era objects lay scattered on the musty carpet, bringing an authenticity to the supernatural events that tethered Abby to her family's dark past. Interviews with descendants of the Ripper's victims were wrapped in subtle fears and unspoken understandings. Their eyes told stories their mouths dared not utter, the legacy of trauma woven into their very beings. They spoke of a curse that spanned generations, while carefully sidestepping direct mention of the reckoning, as if merely saying it could invoke unspeakable horrors. Abby's mind was a whirlwind of analysis and fear. Every conversation added another layer of complexity to the puzzle, while simultaneously unraveling her sanity. The locket she found was always cold against her skin, its engraving a constant reminder of the imminent danger lurking unseen, yet palpably near. Nights were relentless. Visions assailed her dreams and waking moments alike. Each one brought forth more cryptic clues about the reckoning, painting a prophecy so grim it stole her breath. It was as if Jack himself sought to finish what he started so many years ago through her, the last descendant. One chilling evening, Abby stood before the hotel room mirror again. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Her chest tightened as she reached out a trembling hand to touch the smooth surface. Before her fingers could graze the cool glass, the mirror shattered with a sound like the world itself was breaking apart. Screams filled her ears. Were they her own? The shards cascaded around her like glittering rain in the moonlight, each piece reflecting not just her image, but also a sinister shadow that loomed over her shoulder. The room plunged into darkness, as if consumed by an inkwell spilling over reality itself. A suffocating silence enveloped Abby as she crumpled to the floor amid the broken fragments. Her last sight before succumbing to unconsciousness was a smoky figure in Victorian garb, stepping out from within the fractured glass. Jack's presence weaved into reality's fabric once more. In that final moment before darkness took her, Abby's thoughts were not of escape nor rescue, but of revelation and inevitability. Had she called this horror upon herself with her relentless digging? Was this the reckoning? The air around her grew cold as whispers filled the void. Her name echoed off unseen walls. And then, nothing but silence and darkness. London Bridge is falling down, but not before your screams resound. Abigail. Abby Fletcher's eyes snapped open, her heart drumming a frantic beat against her ribs. Darkness clawed at her vision, thick as the fog that had haunted her days in Whitechapel. A stale, musty scent filled her nostrils, a mixture of earth and decay that seemed to cling to the back of her throat. Panic threatened to choke her as she realized she was lying on a cold, uneven floor. Her fingers brushed against damp stone, and the air was so heavy with moisture, it felt like breathing in liquid. She pushed herself up, head spinning, and tried to remember how she ended up in this gloomy abyss. The last thing she recalled was the mirror shattering, sending shards of glass cascading like a waterfall of diamonds before everything went black. Now here she was, somewhere beneath the surface of the city, where Jack the Ripper once roamed, in a tunnel that whispered of secrets and sins long buried. Abby fumbled in her coat pocket and found a small flashlight. A narrow beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing archaic brick walls that curved above her head. She shivered. It was as if the walls were closing in, ready to swallow her whole. Pressing forward, Abby's boots crunched over debris that shouldn't be there. Bits of lace, rusted metal that might have been a button hook, fragments of bone-white china with faded blue patterns. Each step was an echo in the silent tunnel, a reminder that she was very much alone. Or so she thought. A whisper skittered across the air, almost imperceptible. Abby paused, her light wavering. The sound came again, a soft sibilance that seemed to say her name. Abigail. It was neither warm nor welcoming, but carried the chill of the grave. Her breath quivered in her chest as she continued onward, deeper into the abyss. The flashlight's beam danced across inscriptions etched into the bricks. The reckoning. Each repetition more desperate than the last. They were messages from another time, warnings or prophecies perhaps, that made ice course through her veins. Then they appeared, translucent shapes flickering at the edge of sight, women dressed in Victorian garb with hollow eyes and outstretched arms. Their mouths moved silently, as if trying to convey urgent messages from beyond. "You. Why you?" one murmured, her voice a thread of sound woven into the damp air. Abe wanted to run, but something rooted her to the spot, the need for answers that gnawed at her very soul. "Tell me, what is the reckoning?" Abe demanded, her own voice sounding foreign in this tomb of memories. Their spectral hands pointed ahead to an archway where light did not reach. Heart hammering against bone, Abe walked toward it, as if pulled by unseen strings. Beyond the threshold lay a chamber with walls covered in old clippings and scrawled notes that told a tale of unfinished vengeance. And there in the center, a chair with restraints hung open like iron petals. "The reckoning is for you," whispered an apparition with tears of blood tracing down her cheeks. The room began to rumble. Dust cascaded from above as ancient brick and mortar succumbed to an unseen force. Abe's scream, a blend of horror and defiance, tore from her throat as she realized escape was but a dwindling hope. The floor buckled, and the ceiling groaned its impending collapse, a monstrous mouth ready to bite down. In those final moments before darkness reclaimed her vision once more, whether from crashing debris or something more malevolent, Abe's last thought echoed endlessly along with her scream. Was it Jack's whisper calling for his descendant, or had something else been waiting all along? And so it remained. Abe's fate dissolved into shadows and whispers beneath Whitechapel's streets. The truth buried within the reckoning.
Thank you all for joining me on this eerie journey through the dark and misty streets of Whitechapel. Together we've danced with shadows, felt the chilling touch of the past, and faced the whispers of a terror reborn. If the hair on the back of your neck stood up, if you found yourself glancing over your shoulder in a quiet room, then I've done my job well. Remember, every like is a lantern held high against the encroaching fog, and every subscription is a brave step further into the labyrinth of frights I have yet more to share. So, press those buttons with the same trepidation you'd feel in a haunted mansion's library. Who knows which bookshelf will swing open to reveal secrets untold? Stay tuned, brave listeners, for there are many more tales to be told and dark corners to explore. Until next time, keep your wits about you, and never trust the reflections in the mirror too readily. This is your Weaver of Horrors bidding you a whispered goodnight. May it not be your last.
Chapter 1. The Haunting Begins. Evelyn, Evelyn, let down your hair, for in the darkness something wicked stares. In the shadows it waits and looms, bringing with it impending dooms. Evelyn wandered through the desolate halls of the isolated mansion, her footsteps echoing eerily against the cold stone floors. The oppressive atmosphere clung to her like a shroud, suffocating her with the weight of its isolation. As she performed her menial tasks, a sense of foreboding hung in the air, like an ominous fog that refused to dissipate. The mansion itself seemed to watch her with malevolent intent, its ancient walls whispering secrets that Evelyn dared not decipher. Tormented by her cruel stepmother and stepsisters, she bore the burden of their disdain with stoic resignation. But beneath her composed exterior, a tremor of unease lurked, fueled by the unsettling occurrences that seemed to plague her every step. As evening descended, the mansion took on a more sinister aura. Shadows danced in the dim candlelight, casting twisted shapes upon the walls. Unseen whispers slithered through the corridors, causing Evelyn's skin to crawl with unspoken dread. Yet she remained resolute, refusing to acknowledge the gnawing fear that threatened to consume her. In the heart of this malevolent dwelling, Evelyn stood alone against the encroaching darkness, unaware of the horrors that awaited her in the labyrinthine depths of the mansion. Chapter 2. The Sinister Discovery. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she traced the faded letters on the cover of the old, tattered book. It was her mother's, a relic from a time long gone. The pages inside were filled with ominous warnings, each word seeming to leap out at her, filling her with a sense of foreboding. "Beware the curse that lingers within these walls," it seemed to whisper to her. She tried to shake off the feeling, dismissing it as mere superstition, but an inexplicable chill ran down her spine, leaving her unsettled and on edge. As she flipped through the frail pages, the air around her grew heavy with an unspoken dread. The contents of the book seemed to seep into her mind, igniting a primal fear that clawed at her thoughts. She grappled with the unsettling nature of the book, each word etching itself into her consciousness like a sinister tattoo. The weight of its implications bore down on her, and she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about the mansion and its dark history. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows across the room, adding to the sense of unease that enveloped Evelyn. She could hear the distant howl of the wind outside, a mournful symphony that seemed to echo the secrets hidden within the mansion's walls. The words on the pages danced before her eyes, weaving a tale of ancient curses and malevolent forces that slumbered just beneath the surface. Her mind raced with fear and uncertainty as she grappled with the implications of what she had discovered. Was there truth in these pages, or was it merely a figment of her imagination? The line between reality and superstition blurred in her mind, and she felt as though she were teetering on the edge of an abyss, unsure of what lay beyond. The creaking of the floorboards outside the room jolted her from her thoughts, sending a shiver down her spine. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the dimly lit room, half expecting to find something lurking in the shadows. Every whispered breath seemed to carry an otherworldly presence, further fueling her growing sense of dread. Evelyn closed the book with trembling hands, but its haunting words continued to echo in her mind, refusing to be silenced. The chill in the air seemed to linger around her like a ghostly touch, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister had been awakened by her discovery. As night fell over the mansion, Evelyn's world was cast into deeper shadows of uncertainty, and she realized that she had only just begun to uncover the malevolence that lurked within. With a foreboding sense of trepidation, Evelyn steeled herself for what lay ahead, knowing that there was no turning back from the dark secrets that had been unearthed. And so in that moment of haunting revelation, Evelyn's fate became forever entwined with the cursed legacy of the desolate mansion. To be continued. Chapter 3. Descent into Madness. As night falls, Evelyn hears eerie whispers echoing through the corridors. Shadows seem to move on their own, and the mansion's atmosphere becomes increasingly sinister. She begins to question her sanity, unsure if what she's experiencing is real or a figment of her imagination. The darkness outside the windows seemed to be alive, creeping closer and closer to the mansion, enveloping it in an ominous shroud. The air felt heavy with unseen malevolence, causing Evelyn's skin to prickle with unease. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a haunting melody, sending chills down her spine. In the dimly lit hallway, a flickering candle cast distorted shadows on the walls, creating macabre shapes that seemed to dance menacingly. As Evelyn walked, the shadows seemed to reach out for her, beckoning her into their embrace. A cold sweat broke out on her forehead as she clutched the frayed edges of the old book she had found. The words within seemed to mock her, whispering warnings of impending doom and unspeakable horrors. Her hands trembled as she struggled to maintain a grip on reality, the lines between truth and delusion blurring before her eyes. The once familiar surroundings now felt like a labyrinth of twisted illusions, each step deeper into the mansion, leading Evelyn further into the abyss of her own mind. Whispers echoed through the walls, their words elusive yet filled with sinister intent, leaving her heart pounding in terror. Isolated and alone, Evelyn's grip on reality began to slip, giving way to nightmarish hallucinations that clawed at the edges of her consciousness. Every corner held a new terror, every shadow concealed an unseen menace, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from the darkness. The descent into madness had begun, and Evelyn found herself teetering on the edge of a bottomless abyss, unsure of whether she would ever find solid ground again. Chapter 4. Malevolence Unveiled. Evelyn's stepmother, Margaret, finally unveils her true malevolent nature, using dark rituals and spells to torment Evelyn. The mansion itself seems alive with malice, trapping her within its walls and making her question the very fabric of reality. As the night descends, the shadows take on a life of their own, twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. The air becomes heavy with an oppressive darkness that seems to choke the very life out of Evelyn. Evelyn's heart races as she realizes that she is not alone in the mansion. Whispers and sinister laughter echo throughout the corridors, sending shivers down her spine. The flickering candlelight casts eerie, dancing shadows on the walls, creating a sense of impending doom. Every creak of the floorboards and every rustle of the curtains feels like a malevolent presence closing in on her. The atmosphere is suffocating, thick with an otherworldly malevolence that seems to seep into her very bones. As Evelyn frantically searches for a way to escape, the walls seem to shift and twist, disorienting her at every turn. The once familiar surroundings now feel like a labyrinth of terror and despair. In the midst of this escalating horror, Evelyn comes face to face with Margaret, who wears a sinister smile that sends chills down Evelyn's spine. The stepmother's eyes glint with an unholy glee as she chants incantations that reverberate through the mansion, causing the very foundation to tremble. Evelyn realizes that she is up against a force far beyond her comprehension, a darkness that hungers for her very soul. Her breath quickens as she struggles to make sense of the malevolence that looms over her like a suffocating fog. With every passing moment, Evelyn's grip on reality loosens, and she is plunged into a nightmarish realm where nothing is as it seems. The boundaries between the physical and the supernatural blur, leaving Evelyn teetering on the edge of madness. As the chapter unfolds, Evelyn grapples with the horrifying truth that she is entwined in a web of darkness from which there may be no escape. The tension escalates to a fever pitch as she confronts the full extent of the danger that lurks within the mansion's walls. Chapter 5. Confronting Dark Secrets. Evelyn's hands trembled as she pored over the cryptic pages of her mother's diary. Each word seemed to pulse with an ominous weight, drawing her deeper into the web of dark secrets that shrouded her family history. The truth behind her mother's untimely demise was unveiled, and Evelyn realized that she held the key to breaking the curse that plagued her ancestral home. As she delved deeper into the mystery, a chilling realization dawned upon her. The curse was not just a mere superstition, but a malevolent force that had been festering within the mansion for generations. The tendrils of darkness coiled around her heart and mind, threatening to engulf her in its suffocating embrace. The air grew thick with an otherworldly stillness, and Evelyn felt the weight of centuries-old secrets pressing down upon her shoulders. Whispers echoed through the dimly lit corridors, taunting her with fragmented truths and half-remembered lies. Shadows danced in the periphery of her vision, teasing her with glimpses of a reality warped by ancient malevolence. As she pieced together the fragments of her family's tragic history, Evelyn's every breath seemed to draw her further into the yawning abyss of despair. The darknesses that had once lurked at the edges of her consciousness now seeped into her very soul, entwining itself with her essence until it was impossible to distinguish where Evelyn ended and the curse began. In a feverish frenzy, she uncovered long-buried relics of unspeakable power, talismans etched with forbidden symbols and arcane incantations that pulsed with a sinister energy. The revelation sent a chill down her spine, for she realized that by seeking to break free from the curse, she had unwittingly bound herself to its insidious machinations. Evelyn's desperate quest for redemption had led her down a treacherous path, where every step forward only deepened the shadows that threatened to consume her. She was no longer just a victim of the curse, she had become its unwitting accomplice, forever entangled in a web of darkness from which there could be no escape. The revelation left Evelyn reeling, teetering on the precipice of sanity as the mansion's malevolence closed in around her. The chilling truth had transformed her salvation into damnation, and as she stood on the brink of oblivion, a sense of impending doom hung heavy in the air. This is where Chapter 5 ends and Chapter 6 continues. Chapter 6. The Heart-Stopping Showdown. Evelyn's trembling hand reached for the ancient, ornate door handle, her heart pounding in her chest as she prepared to face the malevolent forces that lurked within the mansion. The air was thick with an oppressive sense of dread, and every step she took echoed through the dimly lit corridor. As she ventured deeper into the heart of darkness, whispers filled the air, their sinister tones weaving a web of fear around her. Shadows danced menacingly on the walls, their movements mirroring the palpitations of her own trepidation. A flickering candle cast eerie shadows across the sinister chamber, illuminating the malevolent figure that awaited her. The entity exuded an aura of pure malevolence, its eyes glinting with an otherworldly darkness that threatened to consume her whole. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she confronted the embodiment of evil that had plagued her existence. Every fiber of her being screamed for escape, but she steeled herself with a resolve born of desperation and defiance. In a chilling revelation, the entity spoke with a voice that resonated through her very soul, promising eternal torment and suffering. The tendrils of darkness coiled around her heart and mind, threatening to drag her into an abyss of unimaginable horror. With trembling hands and a voice laced with unyielding determination, Evelyn uttered words of ancient power, invoking forces beyond mortal comprehension. The ethereal battleground crackled with an arcane energy as she fought to break free from the suffocating grip of malevolence. The room trembled as the confrontation reached its zenith, her bravery clashing against the overwhelming darkness. In a heart-stopping showdown, Evelyn faced her deepest fears head-on, refusing to succumb to the tendrils of despair that sought to consume her. As the dust settled and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, Evelyn emerged from the harrowing ordeal with newfound strength and resilience. The mansion's hold on her had been shattered, but the echoes of its haunting presence lingered in the recesses of her mind. The open ending left an indelible sense of unease, hinting at a future haunted by the specter of darkness. As Evelyn ventured into the night, uncertainty hung heavy in the air, promising that the malevolent forces would never truly release their hold on her soul. By crafting this heart-stopping showdown with vivid detail and an atmosphere of palpable dread, Evelyn's Curse, a haunting tale of dark secrets, will captivate audiences with its chilling conclusion. Chapter 7. Forever Haunted. As Evelyn flees into the night, her heart pounds with fear, and her breath comes in ragged gasps. The cold, enveloping darkness seems to follow her, its tendrils reaching out with a promise to never let go. The mansion's malevolence lingers in the air, intertwining with her very essence, leaving an indelible mark on her soul. She stumbles through the overgrown gardens, the moonlight casting eerie shadows that seem to dance and twist around her. The haunting whispers of the cursed mansion echo in her ears, a constant reminder of the evil that forever haunts her. Her footsteps falter as she reaches the wrought iron gates, but even beyond them, the oppressive atmosphere persists. As Evelyn crosses the threshold, a shiver runs down her spine, for she knows that the darkness will never release its hold on her. The chilling uncertainty of what awaits her beyond the mansion's walls fills her with a sense of foreboding dread. The night air is heavy with an unspoken threat, and she realizes that she can never truly escape the malevolent forces that lurk within. The audience is left with a lingering sense of unease as they witness Evelyn's desperate flight, knowing that the evil she encountered will continue to torment her. The story concludes with an open-ended, yet hauntingly conclusive ending, leaving the audience with a chilling awareness that the darkness follows Evelyn, promising to never let go. Thank you for listening to Evelyn's Haunting. I hope you enjoyed this twisted version of a classic fairy tale turned into a terrifying psychological horror story. If you liked the story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more bone-chilling tales. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to bring you more horrifying narratives in the future. Stay tuned, and may your nightmares be plentiful. Good night. Thank you for listening to Evelyn's Haunting. I hope you enjoyed this twisted version of a classic fairy tale turned into a terrifying psychological horror story. If you liked the story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more bone-chilling tales. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to bring you more horrifying narratives in the future. Stay tuned, and may your nightmares be plentiful. Good night.